Hello, friends. Welcome, welcome. We are talking about vitamin D today, why it's important for you, all the things, right? How to know if you're low, if you're deficient. We're going to talk about how to prove it, even how to speculate and kind of have a good educated guess. We're going to talk about all things vitamin D today. So give me just a moment while you guys are coming in. Make sure you stop in and say hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from and if you're catching it live or on the replay. I am simulcasting, streaming at two places right now. So you could be catching me live on YouTube or in my Wellness Circle Facebook group. So I'm gonna go ahead and tell you because everybody always asks what I'm drinking. This is a iced reishi coffee with a little bit of collagen and some, it's actually an herbal supplement called Chill the F Out. It's really good stuff. Anyways, and a little bit of turmeric as well. All right, so let's get started, friends. Today we are talking about vitamin D. And I just did an episode on this, episode 181 on the Root Cause Revolution podcast. A lot of this information will be the same. This will be your opportunity to ask questions. Some of it will be a little bit different, so be sure to check out both. And if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe and leave me a rating or review on the podcast. If you're checking this out on YouTube, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel and click the little bell so you get notifications when I either go live or post new content. So vitamin D, it is, well, number one, it's not a vitamin. And it's kind of weird. I'm not really big into labels. Like, I don't care what you call things, but the fact that they have named this thing vitamin D when it is so clearly a hormone is just such a misnomer. But it is so important for so many things in your body, particularly the immune system, but lots of other things too. Like I said, today we're going to talk about how to know if you're deficient in vitamin D, and both how to prove it and how to kind of speculate and figure it out. We're going to talk about how you get deficient in vitamin D and then how to get sufficient on the other side. So what you can do about it. If this is your first time hanging out with me, if you are new to this, I'm Audrey Christie. I'm a functional and integrative nurse nutritionist and energy medicine practitioner. I help women heal. I help women heal from chronic issues. I help women heal from all those little things that pop up like sore throats and seasonal allergies, chronic illnesses, things that just won't go away. I help you to stop chasing symptoms, start living and fixing all of the imbalances so you can be completely free of symptoms permanently. Sounds pretty good, right? So let's talk vitamin D. So as I said, it's important for a ton of things in your body. It helps the immune system, right? Which is particularly important in the fall and winter. It helps your body to determine which cells are dangerous invaders. And which cells are you. So it helps to determine which cells are not you and which cells are you. What does that sound like? Autoimmune disease, right? So it helps prevent and reduce autoimmune disease and other chronic illnesses. So it's important to know that because we're not just talking about vitamin D helps with the acute things like catching colds and flus and everything else, but we're also talking about the big things like autoimmune disease. And in the short term, in the acute phases, it helps the body to stay alert to all sorts of viral and bacterial invaders, which are detrimental to your health, but they can also worsen flares if you have an autoimmune disease or chronic illness. Now, it is particularly important to pay attention to your vitamin D levels if you live in an area that gets less than normal levels of sunlight. Now, this could be because of the season, like here in Texas, we're in the fall, we're getting less than normal levels of sunlight. It could be because of geography, Texas, less than normal levels of sunlight. But if you're on the opposite end of the globe from me, then you're probably getting increasing levels of sunlight, right? It could even because you could be getting less sunlight than normal because of your lifestyle. And a lot of people will say, well, Audrey, the sun shines in the middle of winter where I live. And that's probably true. It does here in Texas too. In fact, it's quite warm and 81 today for November. But during the fall and winter, the position of the sun versus the position of the earth changes, right? So the length of time you get those valuable sun rays has shifted. Even if you just look at the length of the day, right? I know here it's getting dark about 6 p.m. versus this summer, it felt like the sun would never freaking go down. Like I'd be driving home at 7 or 8 p.m. from something going on. And I'm like, why is the sun still so high in the sky? It should be like blinding me on the horizon. Um, Now, when we hit December, it will be getting dark even earlier, right? So around that winter solstice mark, it'll be getting dark around 5 o'clock even. So that even more dramatically shrinks the amount of time that we have exposure to the sun, exposure to that good pranic energy of the sun. Now, vitamin D is a really, really common nutrient deficiency. Almost everyone, and I mean almost everyone that comes to see me for the first time comes with a vitamin D deficiency. So it's really, really important to make sure that your vitamin D levels are not just okay, but they are functionally okay. And those are two different numbers. We'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. And this becomes even more important if you're heading into fall and winter, because we also get less sunshine, right? We're outside less and more skin is covered. So, if you're moving into fall and winter, so if you're in my hemisphere of the United States or of the world in the United States, in North America, you're going to need to be taking a vitamin D supplement. It's likely going to need to be part of your wellness plan for the next few months. It's going to be part of staying healthy, part of keeping that immune system healthy. And as I've been saying, it's not just your immune system. I know I'm harping on immune system a lot. And sometimes, because when we talk about, oh, your immune system is invisible, right? So it can sometimes be hard to know if you are really seeing benefits from that or not. Some other benefits you might see are building strong hair, strong bones, healthy muscles, right? Healthy mental state. So let's talk about what it looks like when you're deficient in vitamin D. And there's a whole host of symptoms. This is by no means a conclusive list, but some of the things that can be clues that you are deficient in vitamin C are getting sick more than you normally would, right? And that could be any kind of sickness. That could be colds, it could be allergies, right? If you have an autoimmune disease or chronic illness, having flares more than you normally do, it's generally a sign of low vitamin D. If you are always tired and you never feel well rested, no matter how well you sleep, that's a sign of vitamin D deficiency. If you have back pain, specifically low back pain, that can be a sign of vitamin D deficiency. If you're feeling down, and not necessarily clinical depression, although there is some causation and correlation there with vitamin D levels, but more particularly if you're just feeling generally unmotivated, okay? That's a sign of vitamin D deficiency. If you're feeling anxious, that's another sign of vitamin D deficiency. And I encourage you to check out my previous episode on anxiety. I linked that on the show notes page for this, which is episode 180. I think I said 181 earlier, but this is actually episode 180. So if you go to audreychristie.com/180, and I'll put that in the description below this, it will take you, you'll see the list of all the resources that I'm mentioning here. If you have wounds on your body and they're not healing very fast, that is generally a sign of vitamin D deficiency. If you are losing more than normal amounts of hair, that's a sign of vitamin D deficiency. Most people, well, if you're losing more than about 100 strands a day, but that can be variable depending on how much hair you have. I have very fine hair, always have. I was born with it. It's just fine blonde hair, right? So if I lost 100 strands a day, I would be in full flippin' panic mode, right? But if you're somebody whose hair takes 2.5 hours to blow dry and you have tons of thick, luscious hair, then losing 100 strands a day might not make you super worried, right? So you know how often, how frequently, how much hair is kind of normal to see in your hairbrush or in the shower drain. So just noticing that if you're losing a lot more hair, that's a sign of vitamin D deficiency. Muscle pain is a sign of vitamin D deficiency. And then, of course, the real obvious one is having a lab value of less than 50 to 70. 50 is the low end, 70 is the high end. Most conventional medical doctors will tell you that 30 is plenty, right? 30 is fine, but in order for you to be healthy, to be well, to experience all the benefits of having all of the vital vitamin D that your body needs, you need to be between 50 and 70. Some studies even suggest upwards of 70. And so it's one of those things that you can test, right? You can just take a test, or you can guess. And the way you kind of guess is that if you're not tan on about 80% of your body, that's a sign your vitamin D levels probably aren't high enough. It's not as accurate as a lab test, obviously, but it's going to give you a good idea to get started. So let's talk a little bit about how vitamin D deficiency happens, okay? So it happens in a few different ways. Number one, if you're not getting enough of the of vitamin D in your diet, right? Often I see that happening if you're following a really strict vegan diet that is not necessarily whole foods plant based. So a lot of times I have people be, I'm so healthy, I eat a vegan diet. All good. Love a vegan diet. However, most people I meet are junk vegans. So they eat vegan donuts and vegan bread and vegan cheese and vegan meat substitutes. That does not constitute a healthy diet. And I could go on and on and on. That's a story for another day. But people who follow a really strict vegan diet that are eating, I call them junketarians oftentimes, um, they are generally deficient in vitamin D. Now, most natural sources of vitamin D do have some kind of animal, they come from an animal place, right? There are some plant-based sources like mushrooms, but generally people aren't consuming enough to get it every day. So usually you're going to find vitamin D in fish, fish oils, and then of course you'll see them in things like fortified milks and cereals, both plant and dairy. Those are not helping you. Best if avoided, okay? I don't recommend you using milk to try to increase your vitamin D level. It just doesn't work. The vitamin D in milk is not bioavailable, meaning you cannot absorb it in your body. Okay. And then another source is liver. And I don't recommend liver for all sorts of reasons beyond my personal distaste for liver. But the liver in a mammal, just like the liver in us in mammals, is where things go to detox, right? So it's really, really easy to get an unhealthy liver, even if you're grass fed, grass finished. If you must eat liver, then please, please, please eat 100% grass fed and finished liver if you're going to do that, but I don't recommend that for getting your vitamin D. Another reason why vitamin D can become deficient is things we've talked about before, right? Reduced exposure to sunlight. So it could be that you live in the northern latitudes of the globe. It could be that you wear long robes or long sleeves for weather or for religious or um, religious reasons or community reasons. It could be that you have an occupation that puts you in an office 8 hours a day, right? And it could be that you're slathering sunscreen all over yourself, which I do not recommend. There's a little bug buzzing around me in here. Um, I do not recommend that you wear sunscreen unless you absolutely have to be in the sun between 11 and 3 p.m. Okay. So during the fall and winter months, vitamin D deficiency can be more prevalent, right? Less sunlight, more clothes, outside less. And then another reason why vitamin D becomes deficient is because if you have darker skin, if you have deeper melanin pigments, that reduces the body's ability to make vitamin D in response to sunlight exposure. So if you have darker skin tones, if you have more melanin in your skin, you can be at higher risk for vitamin deficiency and you have to spend more than the recommended 25 to 30 minutes in the sun. Another reason is that sometimes as we get older, our kidneys can't convert vitamin D from its active form. And so that starts to increase your risk of vitamin D deficiency. And lastly, most commonly, weather is one common reason. The other common reason is that your digestive tract just can't absorb vitamin D. I tell people all the time that if you're having any signs of gut dysbiosis, of leaky gut, if you have inflammation in your body, if you have seasonal allergies, if you have GI tract inflammation, if your drainage pathways are not open and moving, then taking a vitamin D pill is likely not going to do anything. It's not going to be absorbed. And that's even more of a concern if you have an actual diagnosis of Crohn's or celiac or IBS, right? Any intestinal disease or imbalance is going to prevent you from absorbing that vitamin D pill. It really, really impacts your body's ability to absorb all vitamins from the food that you eat and from all the supplements that you take, but for vitamin D as well. So I really like to tell people to use a sublingual or under the tongue drop for vitamin D. So that's one thing that I really encourage you to do. I have worked hard on my gut for a long time and I still take a sublingual vitamin D because it's too important to chance. Okay. So Here's the thing. If you're wondering if you have low vitamin D, two ways, right? Number one, if you're not tan on 80% of your body, quite likely you're deficient in vitamin D. If you're headed into fall and winter, you're going to be even more deficient, so it's time to supplement now. Number two, you can take a vitamin D blood test. This is a test you'll have to go to the lab for. They're not very expensive. They're like 40, 45-ish bucks, something like that. Um, that's something that I can order for you for cash pay. I don't mark up lab tests, like upcharge lab tests. I just run them for you for whatever it costs me. But you can also get this done at your primary care physician, right? So it's something that they should be checking every year, but you might have to ask for it. I like people to get tested twice a year, once in the spring, summer area, and then once in the fall, winter. Like I said, if you have health insurance and a regular PCP, ask them to run this with your regular blood work. They should be doing it anyways, but many are not. Make sure you have it looked at from a functional level. Now, the cool thing about vitamin D and PCPs while we're on this train, actually, wait, let me back up. Vitamin D is really, really too important to guess or to skip just in case you might be too high. And vitamin D is one of the few things that you can take and it's not excreted in your urine. So you can cause a problem if you take too much. Okay. All that being said, vitamin D is too important, too important. It will prevent you from getting viruses that are going around. Things like even the virus. There's been multiple statistics put out that vitamin D deficiency is like the one thing that matters, whether you have been vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated. It's a huge determining factor in whether or not you will get COVID-19 and not just get it, but get really, really sick. Okay. All right. Now, cool thing about vitamin D is it's starting to be recommended by conventional medical doctors. I always like it when somebody comes to me and says, my family doctor put me on vitamin D. Awesome. The problem is that it's usually in a pill form, which we've already covered, not going to work, right? The second problem is that it's only vitamin D3. And we have known since 2018, maybe even earlier, I think it came out in 2018, that you have to, if you're going to take D3, you have to take it with K2. Otherwise, your body holds on to that calcium. That D3 is helping your body hold on to that calcium, but it doesn't know where to take it. So it ends up in your organs. It ends up calcifying in your blood vessels. You end up with calcium deposits in places that you shouldn't. So you want to make sure that you're taking a sublingual drop, that you're putting that drop under the tongue, and that it is a D3K2 to make sure that it is absorbed as well as possible. Now, sometimes people take this information and they say, okay, I'm going to go get a D3 or I've already got my D3. I'm going to go buy some K2 and we're going to take them together. Please don't do that. So if you have your K2 out of balance with your D3, you're going to cause things like anxiety, like your heart racing, all kinds of uncomfortable symptoms. Okay. So buy the supplement that has them together. Okay. That has the D3 and K2 in the same bottle, that the supplement manufacturers made the balance for, okay? So that way you can avoid those symptoms, the anxiety, the heart racing, the symptoms of too much K2, and you get the benefit of having the D3 plus K2, right? Another caveat to think about is not taking really high doses of D3. Oftentimes a physician will see that you are low in D3 and they're like, take 10,000 units. Do not do that. Do not take 10,000 units. Please take 3 to 5,000 units, depending on all sorts of variables, but somewhere between 3 and 5,000 units. Start out every other day and then go to every day and make sure that you are getting tested. Okay. So sum it up, the steps. First step, get tested. Second step, I can't talk. Second step, supplement. Too many S's there. If you are available if you are living somewhere where it is summer or spring, or any time of year, if you can, it's always best to go out and expose as much skin as possible. I like to say as much skin as legal for 20 to 25 to 30 minutes in direct sunlight. Indirect sunlight doesn't count. So if it is through sunscreen, if it is through a window, whether that be your car window or your house windows, there's UV panels, UV treatment in those things so that you can't get the UV light that you need in order to get the D3. Okay. The third thing you're going to do is supplement D3 sublingually with K2. Now, if you've already got a bottle of D3, that's totally fine. We've already got a bottle of D3, that's totally fine. Finish that. The next one should be D3K2. On the show notes page, audreychristie.com/181, I've linked some brands in the apothecary so that you can go through and check those out. Yeah, and so that is all I have for you today. That's my whole spiel on D3 and K2. So if you guys have any questions about vitamin D, about vitamin D deficiencies, about like what maybe you should do in your case, I'd be happy to answer those. Just pop them in the comments below. And I think I will be back next week for Wellness Wednesday. The following Wednesday, next week we'll talk about food sensitivities. The following Wednesday I'll be off. It'll be my birthday and I will be traveling. So I hope you have an amazing, amazing rest of your week. I'll see you next week for Wellness Wednesday.